The miraculous secret of right mindfulness. Thinking can bring us either suffering or happiness. This is something everyone knows. For instance, you might be sitting under a tree on a beautiful spring day. Nothing particularly notable is happening except for a gentle breeze playing with your hair. However, your mind is far away, perhaps recalling a spring day from years ago when you were in distress. You might have lost your job, failed an exam, or lost your beloved dog. This memory makes you anxious. What if I lose my job again? Why did I say that to that person? I'm definitely going to hear about it. Now I'm really in trouble. How will I pay my debts? One worry leads to another, spiraling into a multitude of concerns. Soon you might feel as if your life is falling apart, all while you're just sitting under a tree. Delusions, fears, and clinging thoughts are significant issues for us. We often bind ourselves to unhealthy thought patterns, habits deeply ingrained in our subconscious, leading us along well-worn paths of suffering. The second step on the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path offers us a way out of these habits, a method to direct our thoughts positively and beneficially. When we begin to understand things correctly, with mindfulness about the essential points in the first step, right view, of the Noble Eightfold Path, our minds naturally flow towards right thinking. Here, thinking refers not just to thoughts, but to any intentional mental state. Understanding that craving is the root of suffering, we also realize that thoughts connected with greed, hatred, and delusion always lead to suffering. Right thinking involves letting go of negative thoughts such as clinging, anger, and cruelty, and replacing them with wholesome thoughts such as letting go, compassion, and love. These wholesome thoughts work to counteract the mind's tendencies towards attachment and anxiety, helping us progress on the path leading to lasting happiness. Letting go, opposite to the mind of craving or attachment, is letting go. Think of it as the most noble form of generosity. On the path of following the Buddha, we will have opportunities to give away or relinquish everything that holds us back, that hinders us from achieving the ultimate happiness: possessions, people, beliefs, views, and even the attachment to our own body and mind. When people hear this, they begin to worry. They fear that following the Buddha's teachings means they must abandon everything to join the monastic community. While becoming a monk or nun is indeed one way to practice generosity, most of us can practice the virtue of letting go within our busy family lives. What we need to relinquish is not our material possessions or our family and friends, but rather the mistaken perception that these things belong to us. We need to let go of the habit of clinging to people and material possessions, as well as the concepts, opinions, and beliefs in our lives. Material generosity. Letting go is a gradual process. Before we can truly relinquish anything, we must cultivate the mind of generosity. We do this by deeply contemplating the meaning of generosity and letting go, and by recognizing the pros and cons of practicing this virtue. Let's start with the easiest form of generosity, which is giving material possessions. First, observe how the mind can deter us from practicing generosity. We often tell ourselves that we need to be wealthy before we can give. Wait until I'm rich, then I'll build shelters for the homeless, hospitals, and magnificent meditation centers. Then I will help countless people. As a result, we gather, accumulate, and invest here and there. As our capital grows, we become even more preoccupied with worries and more attached to what we have. It seems we no longer have time to practice generosity. Another trap of the mind is attaching external motives to giving. When we give a gift, we discover that it makes us feel happier. Sometimes, giving a gift brings us more joy than it does to the recipient. The act of giving can make us feel very proud. Our ego is boosted by how expensive or beautiful the gift is, how well it reflects our taste and choice. Furthermore, we might secretly think that the recipient now owes us a favor. We might use our exaggerated generosity to lower the status of the recipient. When we give something to someone, the element of seeking joy is often present. Giving to feel satisfied, to make someone think well of us, or to owe us a favor spoils our generosity. A less skillful form of generosity occurs when we give to soothe our own pain. For example, a family might donate money to build a park or community center named after a deceased loved one. This gift might be a way for them to transform their attachment to the loved one into the idea of creating a lasting legacy. True generosity of the mind involves letting go not only of possessions, but also of attachment to the deceased and the feelings of pain or anger. I know of a wealthy couple who gave away all their possessions after the death of their only son. Although outwardly it seemed like they were contributing to charitable causes, they were actually giving out of anger. They wanted to extinguish the pain of losing their son by punishing themselves. Monasteries and charitable institutions may benefit greatly from such gifts, but the givers do not gain true benefits. On the other hand, some people give to transform their suffering into compassion and love. This type of generosity is skillful and can heal wounds. The best way to give is when we expect nothing in return, not even a thank you. We give when the mind is free, when we have everything we need to be happy. Such giving is motivated by a sense of completeness and abundance, not by suffering or loss. Anonymous giving, where the recipient is unknown, is a wonderful form of generosity. Giving quietly, without making a fuss, reduces our greed and attachment to the possessions we own. The highest form of material generosity occurs when we help others, even at the risk of our own lives. Watching the news on television, I once saw a man exemplify this during a horrific accident. It was a cold winter day in 1983 when a plane departing from Washington, D.C. to Florida failed to take off due to snow on its wings. The plane crashed into the 14th Street Bridge. Most people on the plane died. Some victims fell into the icy Potomac River, the water frigidly cold. At the spot where victims were struggling to climb out of the water onto ice floes, a rescue helicopter arrived and lowered a cable within reach of a man. But instead of grabbing the cable to save himself, he handed it to a woman. She was pulled to safety. When the helicopter returned, despite being freezing, the man handed the cable to another woman who was also rescued. By the time the helicopter came back for the third time, the man had succumbed to the cold and died. We don't need such dramatic circumstances to act heroically, nor do we need to possess a fortune to practice generosity. All we need is the will to give, even in small ways. With this mindset, we can, for example, spend time with others, helping them overcome loneliness. Even better, we can help them conquer their suffering by sharing what we have learned on the Buddha's path and our knowledge of mindfulness and meditation practices. This kind of sharing is more precious than any material gift. Attachment to people, the past, and views. As we know, afflictions and suffering arise from attachment to anything: form, feeling, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. Letting go of attachment to people, experiences, and views is much more challenging than giving away material possessions, but doing so brings us the ultimate happiness. Attachment to the body has two aspects. The most obvious is our attachment to other people in our lives. Attachment is not love. It is not like caring for someone and wanting them to be happy. Rather, it is jealousy or blind possessiveness, wanting to own another person. For example, a husband or wife wants to possess their spouse, or domineering friends want to control everything to the point where they destroy the friendship. Practicing generosity in relationships means trusting others and giving them space, freedom, and self-respect. However, even in good relationships, there can be an element of attachment. All happy couples hope their marriage will last forever. Yet there is always an element of fear. He might leave. My wife might die before me. Thinking about these things can cause us great pain, but we must remember that every marriage, no matter how happy, will eventually end. Even if a couple lives together for 50 years and dies peacefully together, at the moment of death, they will part and follow their paths according to their past actions. A subtler form of attachment to the body is the clinging to it and thinking that we own it. No matter how healthy our body is now, we know that with time, age will make it weak, sick, and ultimately die. Moreover, we cannot control what will happen to our bodies. We cannot know whether we will be happy or sad in the next moment. We also cannot control the thoughts that pass through our minds. For example, when hearing the word dog, can you avoid thinking of a dog's image? Even in such a simple case, we lack control. We try to protect ourselves from the relentless assault of change by creating concepts, images, and clinging to them. To my house, my car, my job, my lover, my body, as if all these things have a self that we can rely on. The root cause of this attachment is fear. But no matter how tightly we hold on to them, over time, everything in this world changes. Everything will shatter like glass, and then how much we will suffer. Possession, attachment, or clinging to anything brings affliction to our lives. Using a material possession without clinging to it helps us avoid suffering when it is lost, broken, or stolen. Similarly, clinging to our family, friends, or our sense of self, our position or job, family background, social status, will cause us pain when these concepts inevitably shatter. When we are not attached, our minds remain free. This relaxed state protects us and reduces our stress, restlessness, anxiety, and fear. To develop an attitude of non-attachment, we must first spend some time alone. Most of us cling to being around others because we fear loneliness. But being alone does not mean being lonely. Instead, solitude creates space for us to think, contemplate, meditate, and free our minds from noise and attachment. As our greed, anger, and delusion diminish through the practice of mindfulness and meditation, our ability to be present with others without clinging to them grows stronger. When the mind is free, even when interacting with or being around many people, we do not cling, thereby avoiding the suffering that attachment brings. Every day, the Buddha walked many miles with thousands of monks, nuns, and lay people around him. Some lived in the monastic community with the Buddha. Others came to consult with him. Still, others came to ask about their problems, debate with the Buddha, or simply to hear the Dharma. Despite being among the crowd, the Buddha maintained his solitary practice. His attitude of non-attachment was complete. Occasionally, some monks, nuns, or lay disciples of the Buddha would spend time living in solitude in the forest to perfect their practice of letting go. However, they did not live in the forest permanently. Once they had let go of attachment, they practiced living with others while maintaining a steady, free state of mind. This state of mind is called equanimity. The practice of equanimity applies not only to monks and nuns, but also to anyone who loves solitude or wants to live without attachments. All those who practice equanimity, even monks and nuns, must live with others at some point. Right thinking helps us develop a stable mental state so that the changes in our living conditions or the people around us do not disturb us. Following the example of the Buddha, we practice maintaining equanimity in our hearts. Letting go also requires us to abandon our attachment to beliefs, views, or thoughts. This is very difficult. We tend to equate our sense of self with our opinions on various issues to define ourselves. We then get so caught up in this identification that we feel personally attacked when someone criticizes the political candidate we support or our views on public policy. However, our ideals, opinions, or views also follow the law of impermanence. Recall what you believed at 16 or 30, and you will see how your personal views have changed. On a broader level, throughout human history, wars have been fought in the name of revered opinions or views. The killing we do to protect material possessions is insignificant compared to the killing we do to defend unworthy views, such as racial discrimination or blind religious fervor. Consider whether beliefs that have led to war are truly worth protecting at the terrible cost of war. Letting go of unwholesome thoughts, words, and actions creates space for us to cultivate wholesome qualities like compassion, joy, nonviolence, and equanimity. Even with wholesome qualities, we should not cling too tightly to them. Letting go requires us to rise above the distinction between good and bad. The Buddha taught that ultimately, even his teachings must be set aside. This teaching is like a raft to be abandoned once you have crossed the river. If we must let go of even the pure mental states brought about by this teaching, then we must let go of unwholesome mental states even more so. I do not mean to say that you can let go of all attachments immediately or achieve liberation in a short time. Seeking instant enlightenment may be just an ego trip. When I give Dharma talks, sometimes people come to me claiming they have achieved enlightenment very quickly. I respond by repeating the Buddha's description of the characteristics of an enlightened person. Because these individuals lack those characteristics, they become very disappointed, sometimes even angry with me for my response. Attachment has been deeply ingrained in our consciousness and has grown over many lifetimes. It cannot be let go of quickly and easily. However, we do not have to wait for many lifetimes to begin. With right understanding, patience, effort, and mindfulness, we can start to free ourselves from attachments, even achieving complete enlightenment in this very life. To attain happiness, we must start now by developing right thinking to let go of attachments and replace them with an open, flexible, and compassionate mind. Overcoming fear. When we begin to practice mindfulness with a mindset of letting go, we often encounter fear. Fear arises from a lack of confidence, being overly emotional, or being too attached to thoughts, opinions, feelings, or physical objects, including our own bodies. It can also stem from approaching something we do not understand or do not know the specific outcome of. For example, imagine you have just been diagnosed with cancer. You have scheduled surgery, after which the doctor will decide if you need further treatment. You are now trying to meditate, but your mind is filled with chaotic thoughts. Thoughts and emotions intertwine, making you frustrated, sad, and very afraid. What should you do now? While meditating, observe each state of mind that arises. If there are too many thoughts and emotions flooding in at once, try to categorize them. What will happen to me? That is fear. How dare that nurse speak to me like that? That is anger. My family is depending on me. I can't be sick. I can't die. That is attachment. My friend also had this illness. His wife still cries when she talks about him. That is sorrow. I hate those injections. That is aversion. Who will take me to my follow-up appointments? That is anxiety. How many people have survived this disease? That is fear again. As you start to categorize them, your thoughts and emotions become more manageable. You are no longer entangled in the fears your mind has created, and you can start to think more rationally. You can reassure your mind with thoughts about the competence and dedication of the doctors and nurses, the latest advancements in treating this disease, and the many people diagnosed with similar conditions who continue to live normal lives. When you counteract the thoughts causing you anxiety and fear in this way, you are practicing mindfulness in action. You can see how the mind plays many tricks, using thoughts to create fear and fear to create more thoughts. This can also be a good opportunity for self-reflection. You can review past actions and how you have acted unwisely out of fear. From this, you resolve to maintain mindfulness, preventing fear from driving your actions in the future. Once the mind is calm and clear, you can return to observing your breath or another meditation object. However, know that fearful thoughts will arise again during your meditation sessions. With the experience you have gained, you can ignore the specific content of these thoughts and simply observe what happens to all your thoughts and feelings. You will notice that every mental state arises and reaches a peak. No matter how intense it is, if you stay with it, as if it were a friend guiding you through difficult times, you will see that all mental states pass away. Now that you are aware of the thought process, you gain confidence that no matter how terrifying a thought might be, it will eventually pass. Once you can fully cope with extreme fear, you will no longer view fear the same way. You will understand that fear is just a normal mental state that comes and goes. It has no substance and cannot harm you. As such, your attitude towards fear will start to lighten. You will know that you can observe and let go of any mental state that arises. When you let go of the fear of fear, you achieve a sense of liberation. This method can be applied to other negative mental states, including memories, imaginations, daydreams, or worries about issues you face. Sometimes you may fear painful memories because you think you cannot face them. But now you know you can deal with any mental state you previously wanted to suppress. Mindfulness practice teaches you that it is not the mental states themselves that cause distress, but your attitude towards them. You may think that mental states form your personality and are part of your existence. Then you try to push away the unpleasant ones as if they were foreign parts. But in reality, you cannot push anything away because, to begin with, they are not yours. The best response is to regularly practice thoroughly observing the mind, not reacting with attachment or aversion to any mental state, and diligently practicing to liberate the mind from all unwholesome states. Loving kindness. When you let go of negative mental states, you create space in your mind to cultivate positive thoughts. Right thinking means replacing thoughts of anger and hatred with thoughts of loving kindness. Loving kindness, or metta, is an innate ability. It is a warm feeling imbued with a sense of kinship, a feeling of connectedness with all beings. Because we seek peace, happiness, and joy for ourselves, we know that all other beings also desire these things. Loving kindness illuminates the world with the wish that all beings enjoy a comfortable life in harmony, mutual respect, and material abundance. Although we all have the seeds of loving kindness within us, we must make an effort to nurture it. When our minds are filled with worries, entanglements, tension, and fear, the innate ability to love cannot flourish. To cultivate the seeds of loving kindness, we must practice relaxation. In a calm state of mind, such as when we practice mindfulness meditation, we can forget past disagreements with others and forgive their faults, weaknesses, and offenses against us. At that point, loving kindness will naturally grow within us. Similar to the practice of letting go, loving kindness also begins with a thought. Usually, our minds are filled with opinions, ideas, beliefs, and thoughts. We are conditioned this way by our culture, traditions, education, relationships, and past experiences. From these conditioned thoughts, we form prejudices and judgments. These narrow thoughts stifle the loving kindness that exists within us. However, within the framework of this mistaken thinking, thoughts of friendly relationships with others sometimes arise. We catch a glimpse of it like a flash of lightning illuminating the landscape. As we practice relaxation and let go of negativity, we begin to recognize our discriminatory prejudices and not let them control our minds. Then, the mind of loving kindness begins to shine, revealing its true strength and beauty. The loving kindness we seek to cultivate is not the type of love we usually know. When we say we love someone, our mind often conjures up a feeling conditioned by that person's actions or qualities. We might admire their appearance, behavior, thoughts, voice, or attitude. If these conditions change, what we call love may also change. In extreme cases, that love can even turn into hatred. This love-hate dynamic pervades our ordinary feelings. We love this person and hate that one, or we love now and hate later, or we love when things are going well but hate when something goes wrong. If our love changes with time, place, and circumstances, then what we call love is not true loving kindness. It may be lust, a desire for material security, a wish to be loved, or some other form of attachment. True loving kindness has no external motivation. It never turns into hatred when circumstances change. It never causes us to become hateful if our love is not reciprocated. True loving kindness motivates us to always treat everyone kindly and speak well of them, whether they are present or absent. When you are truly enlightened, you will love all beings in the universe without discrimination. This love is limitless and boundless. It includes not only all beings present, but also wishes for everyone without distinction or favoritism to be happy in the endless future. Let me share with you a story about an act of compassion that had a profound impact on many people. There was an old woman and her daughter living in a small house in India. Nearby, a monk lived in a small hut. Out of admiration, the old woman regarded the monk as her son and taught her daughter to treat him as her brother. Every morning, the monk would go to the village to beg for alms. He never forgot to stop at their house to receive food offered with great reverence and devotion by the old woman and her daughter. Every evening, he would visit the villagers, encouraging them to meditate and lead peaceful lives. One afternoon, on his way to the village, the monk overheard a conversation between the old woman and her daughter. The old woman said, "My dear, tomorrow your brother will come to our house to beg for alms. Here is butter, here is honey, here is rice, here are spices, here are vegetables. Prepare a delicious meal for your brother." The daughter asked, "Mother, where will you be tomorrow?" "I plan to go into the forest to meditate all day." "But what will you eat?" "There is some leftover rice from today. I will use it to make porridge. That will be enough for me. But remember to prepare a good meal for your brother and offer it to him when he passes by our house." Hearing this conversation, the monk thought, "This old woman loves and respects me so much that she instructs her daughter to prepare a fine meal for me, while she eats only a bit of porridge made from leftover rice. I am not worthy of this good meal if I do not achieve anything through my practice. I must strive relentlessly to free myself from unwholesome mental states to be deserving of her loving gift." The monk returned to his hut and put away his robe. He vowed not to go to the village for alms until he had attained liberation. He sat on his meditation mat with the following determination: even if my blood dries up, even if my flesh disintegrates, even if this body becomes nothing but bones, I will not rise until I have achieved complete enlightenment. With this vow, the monk meditated throughout the afternoon, all night, and part of the next morning. Just before the time for him to go for alms, he attained his goal. He then put on his robe and went to the village for alms. When he reached the small house, the daughter offered him a sumptuous meal. The girl eagerly awaited her mother's return after a day of meditation. That afternoon, as soon as the mother arrived home, the daughter ran out to greet her and said, "Mother, I have never seen our monk look so dignified, radiant, serene, and beautiful. My dear, perhaps he has attained liberation, true freedom from negative mental states. We are indeed fortunate to have such a monk living nearby, but if we truly respect him, we must follow his path. From now on, we must meditate diligently so that we can also achieve that state." From then on, both the mother and daughter meditated diligently until they too attained deep states of concentration. Many villagers followed their example and also achieved deep meditative states. This was the profound impact of the old woman's loving kindness, compassion for enemies. Some people might wonder how they can have compassion for their enemies. How can they sincerely say, "May my enemy be happy, peaceful, and healthy. May they not face any difficulties or calamities"? This question arises from a mistaken view. People with troubled minds may behave in ways that offend or harm us, leading us to see them as enemies. However, in truth, no one is inherently our enemy. It is merely their negative mental states that cause problems for us. Mindfulness helps us see that these mental states are not permanent. They are temporary and can be altered and transformed. The best way for us to achieve peace and happiness is to help our enemies resolve their issues. If all our enemies were freed from suffering, dissatisfaction, anger, doubt, tension, and frustration, they would have no reason to be our enemies. Once free from suffering, they are just like anyone else, a wonderful being. We can practice compassion for everyone: our parents, teachers, relatives, friends, unfriendly people, cold-hearted individuals, and those who cause us trouble. It is not necessary to be acquainted or close to someone to extend compassion to them. In fact, sometimes it is easier not to know them well. Why? Because if we don't know them, we can treat everyone equally. We can visualize all beings in the universe as points of light in space and wish for them all to be happy and peaceful. Although our wish alone may not make it a reality, cultivating the desire for others to experience love and happiness is a wholesome intention that brings joy to our hearts. If everyone wished for the happiness and love of others, we would have world peace. Imagine if there were 6 billion people in the world, and each one cultivated this wish. There would be no one left to harbor hatred, no more fighting or conflicts. All actions stem from the mind. If the mind is impure, the actions that follow will be impure and harmful. The opposite is also true. As the Buddha taught us, pure thoughts of compassion and love are stronger than hatred, more powerful than weapons. Weapons destroy, but love enables people to live in peace and harmony. So what do you think is more powerful and enduring? Overcoming anger. The biggest obstacle to compassion is anger. When our hearts are filled with anger, there is no room for loving kindness towards ourselves or others, no space for peace or tranquility. Everyone reacts to anger in their own way. Some try to justify their anger by telling themselves, "I have a right to be angry." Others cling to their anger for a long time, sometimes for months or even years, feeling that their anger makes them special or principled. Some express their hatred through actions against the person they are angry with. Regardless of how you express anger, you can be sure of one thing: anger harms you more than it harms the person you are angry with. Have you noticed how you feel when you're angry? Do you feel the tension, the discomfort in your chest, the heat in your stomach, the blurriness in your eyes? Does your mind become clouded, your words harsh and difficult to hear? Doctors say that frequently expressing anger has serious health consequences: high blood pressure, nightmares, insomnia, stomach pain, or even heart attacks. Anger is equally harmful to the mind. Frankly speaking, anger makes our bodies and minds very miserable. It also strains our relationships. You often avoid the person you are angry with, don't you? Conversely, when they know you are angry, they avoid you. No one wants to interact with someone in a fit of anger. A person full of anger can be unreasonable and sometimes even dangerous. Moreover, anger often doesn't harm the person you're angry with as much as it harms you. In many cases, you are furious with someone who doesn't even know they've offended you, so it doesn't affect them at all. Instead, you are the one who has to turn red-faced, raise your voice, and create a scene, making yourself miserable. Your rival might even mock your anger. Having a habitual attitude of anger and resentment can negatively impact your health, relationships, lifestyle, and future. You might end up suffering from the misfortunes you wished upon your enemies. Clearly, anger can harm us, so how do we deal with it? How can we let go of anger and replace it with compassion and loving kindness? To address anger, we must first decide to restrain ourselves from acting out in anger. Whenever I think of restraint, I remember my uncle's elephant. When I was young, my uncle had a very large and beautiful elephant. My friends and I liked to tease this elephant by throwing stones at it until it got angry. The elephant was huge and could have easily trampled us if it wanted to. But instead, it did something very admirable. One day, when we were throwing stones, the elephant used its trunk to break off a small branch about the size of a pencil and hit us with it. It demonstrated an incredible level of restraint, doing just enough to make us respect it. A few days later, the elephant was still angry with us, so it refused to let us ride it. My uncle told us to take the elephant to a large stream where we scrubbed its skin with coconut shells while it relaxed and enjoyed the cool water. After that, it completely let go of its anger towards us. When you feel justified in reacting strongly in anger, I urge you to remember the restrained response of my uncle's large but gentle elephant. Another way to deal with anger is to observe its results. We know very well that when we are angry, we cannot see the truth clearly. Therefore, we might commit unwholesome actions. As we know, intentional actions in the past are the only things that truly belong to us. Our future lives depend on today's intentional actions, just as our present lives are the result of past intentional actions. Intentional actions carried out under the influence of anger cannot lead us to a happy future. The best remedy for anger is patience. Patience does not mean letting others walk over us. Patience means using mindfulness to extend the time to act correctly. When we respond to provocation with patience, we speak the truth at the right time and with the right words. We use gentle, kind, and precise words, as if speaking to a baby or a dear friend, to prevent them from doing harm to themselves or others. You may raise your voice, but that doesn't mean you're angry. In fact, you're skillfully protecting someone you care about. There is a famous story that illustrates the patience and wisdom of the Buddha when confronted with an angry person. There was a wealthy and powerful Brahmin who had a habit of getting angry easily, sometimes for no reason. He often quarreled with everyone. If someone was offended and didn't get angry, he would get angry because of that. The Brahmin heard that the Buddha never got angry. One day, he went to see the Buddha and used abusive language towards him. The Buddha listened patiently and compassionately. Then he asked the Brahmin, "Do you have family or friends?" "Yes, I have many friends and relatives," the Brahmin replied. "Do you visit them often?" the Buddha asked. "Of course, I visit them very often." "Do you bring gifts when you visit them?" "Certainly. I never visit them without bringing gifts," the Brahmin answered. The Buddha asked again, "When you bring gifts, suppose they don't accept them. What will you do with the gifts?" "I will take them home and share them with my family," the Brahmin replied. The Buddha then said, "Likewise, you have given me a gift. I do not wish to accept it. It is yours. Take it home and share it with your family." The Brahmin felt very ashamed when he understood and admired the Buddha's compassionate advice. Finally, to overcome anger, we can consider the benefits of compassion. According to the Buddha, when we practice compassion, we will sleep peacefully, wake comfortably, and have pleasant dreams. By being close to all beings and other creatures, celestial beings will protect us. If we are full of compassion, then at that moment, smoke, fire, poison, and weapons cannot harm us. We can meditate easily. A serene radiance appears on our faces. We pass away peacefully and are reborn in the highest realms. Aren't these visions more acceptable than the misery, poor health, and bad karma that anger can bring us? As our mindfulness of our mental states grows, we will recognize more and more quickly when we begin to get angry. Then, as soon as a thought of anger arises, we can start to apply methods to counteract anger with patience and mindfulness. We also need to seize every opportunity to correct our hasty actions. If we have said or done something to someone in anger, as soon as that moment passes, we should consider apologizing to the person, even if we think they were wrong or acted worse than we did. Taking a few minutes to apologize to someone we have wronged brings immediate and wonderful relief to both parties. Similarly, if we see someone angry with us, we can approach them calmly to try to understand the cause of their anger. We can say, "I'm sorry that I made you angry. I'm not angry with you. Maybe we should resolve this issue as friends." We can also bring a gift to someone we think is angry with us. A gift can soothe an adversary and turn an enemy into a friend. A gift can transform angry words into kindness and roughness into gentleness. Here are some practical ways you can use to manage your anger. Become aware of your anger immediately. Be mindful of your anger and feel its power. Remember that a quick temper is very harmful. Think about the harmful consequences of anger. Practice restraint. Recognize that anger and its causes are impermanent. Recall the story of the Buddha's patience with the Brahmin. Change your attitude by becoming kind and helpful. Ease the tension between you and the person you are angry with by giving a gift or doing something good for them. Remember the benefits of practicing compassion. Remember that we will all pass away one day, and we do not want to depart with a heart full of anger. Compassionate mind. Compassion is the third skillful thought that the Buddha encouraged us to cultivate. Compassion arises when we think about the suffering of others and feel sorrowful for them. It is a virtuous and spontaneous reaction, accompanied by the desire to alleviate the suffering of others. A compassionate mind requires an object. To cultivate compassion, we need to reflect on the sufferings we have personally experienced, empathize with the pain of others, and create an intuitive connection between our suffering and theirs. For example, if we hear about a child being beaten or abused, we can direct our minds towards the child's pain by recalling the feelings of anguish we experienced when treated poorly. Then we can make a wish. May such pain not happen to anyone in the world. May no child be mistreated as I was. Or when someone is sick, we recall how uncomfortable and painful illness can be, and we wish that no one else has to endure similar suffering and anxiety. Or we remember the suffering of being separated from a loved one. This memory leads to compassion for anyone separated from a loved one due to death, divorce, or rejection. And we wish that no one has to go through such pain. Compassion and loving kindness support each other. When our hearts are full of loving kindness, our minds are open and clear enough to recognize the suffering of others. For instance, if someone treats us with contempt or arrogance, through loving kindness, we realize that such rude behavior must come from a person who is suffering internally. Since we have experienced various problems in our lives, our compassion arises and we think, this person must be suffering. How can I help them? If I get angry or upset, I cannot help them and may even exacerbate their problem. We trust that if we continue to act kindly and humbly, this person may gradually or even immediately benefit. Perhaps someday they will admire how we maintain kindness, gentleness, and friendliness despite provocation and begin to emulate this behavior in their interactions with others. As disciples of the Buddha, our compassion should be vast, as illustrated in a story from the Mahayana Sutras. There once was a monk who practiced the meditation of loving kindness and wished to accumulate enough merit to meet Maitreya, the Buddha of loving kindness. His practice made his mind so gentle that he would not harm any living being. One day, he encountered a dog lying by the roadside, groaning in pain from an open wound infested with maggots. The monk knelt before the dog. His first thought was to brush the maggots off the wound, but then he thought, if I use a stick, I might hurt the maggots. If I use my hands, I might kill them because they are so tiny, and if I put them on the ground, someone might step on them. Then he realized what he had to do. He cut a piece of flesh from his thigh, placed it on the ground, and knelt down to remove the maggots from the dog's wound with his tongue, transferring them to his flesh. As he did so, the dog disappeared, and in its place stood Maitreya, the Buddha of loving kindness. We might consider ourselves compassionate, but our level of compassion cannot compare to that of this saintly monk. There is so much suffering around us. Every day, we have many opportunities to practice compassion, but often we find it difficult. Why? The answer is that even in the face of someone else's suffering, it can be hard to endure. To avoid it, we may turn away, close our eyes, or brace ourselves. Mindfulness practice helps us relax and be flexible in any situation life presents. When we keep our minds light and our hearts open, the wellspring of compassion can flow freely. Practicing compassion with loved ones is undoubtedly a challenge, but it is essential for our happiness now and in the future. Parents, spouses, and children greatly need our compassion. We also need to have compassion for ourselves, compassion for oneself. Some readers might wonder why they should practice compassion for themselves. You might say, caring for oneself is selfish. My needs are not important. A true practitioner should have compassion for others. This sounds noble, but you may be deceiving yourself. Upon thorough examination of your mind, you will discover that there is no one in the entire universe you care more about than yourself. There is nothing wrong with this. In fact, having compassion for oneself is the foundation for practicing compassion for others. As the Buddha said, using the mind to observe the entire universe, I do not see anything dearer to oneself than oneself. Since oneself is dearer than others, one who loves oneself will never harm others. It is a mistake to think that being harsh on oneself or viewing oneself as unworthy is better or more spiritually oriented. The Buddha realized through his own experience that self-mortification does not lead to enlightenment. Of course, we need to practice self-restraint, but we do so with the determination to act in our best interests. Upon close examination, moderate self-discipline is an expression of practicing compassion for oneself. Moreover, we cannot practice genuine compassion for others without having compassion for ourselves. If we try to act compassionately with a sense of unworthiness or thinking others are more important than us, the real motivation for our actions is self-inflicted suffering, not compassion for others. Similarly, if we act with cold detachment towards those we help, our actions may stem from arrogance. True compassion arises from a heart that resonates with one's own suffering, reflecting the suffering of others. Compassion for oneself, based on healthy self-love, urges us to reach out sincerely to help others. Firefighters exemplify this aspiration. They are known for their great courage in risking their lives to save those trapped in burning buildings. However, they do not intentionally sacrifice themselves. They do not rush into the flames unprepared. Instead, they carefully wear helmets, protective gear, and make calculated decisions based on their judgment and skills to save others without endangering themselves. Similarly, we should clothe ourselves with compassion and love for ourselves, purify our motives to the best of our abilities, and keep our minds clear. From this clarity, we can help others effectively and encourage our own spiritual progress. In truth, the distinction between oneself and others is not as clear as we often think. Any attitude we habitually use towards ourselves, we will use towards others, and any attitude we use towards others, we will use towards ourselves. It's like eating and serving others from the same bowl. In the end, everyone shares the same food. Therefore, we must be careful about what we put on the table. When meditating, we need to reflect on how we react to ourselves and others when things go wrong or mistakes happen. Do we react by blaming or forgiving, worrying or letting go, being harsh or gentle, patient or losing our temper? While recognizing our mistakes, feeling their consequences, and resolving to correct them is important, self-blame and punitive measures are not beneficial. No one feels happy after being scolded or reprimanded. People often react by becoming distant, angry, defensive, or stubborn. For example, if someone is exercising to lose weight and skips a workout, they might think, "You're fat and lazy. You'll never change." Such self-talk makes it less likely they will exercise the next day. An untrained mind is ignorant and suffers greatly. This is why we do blameworthy things. Remembering that our mistakes are due to our suffering helps us extend compassion to ourselves rather than harsh judgment and self-punishment. It is crucial to approach our efforts to meditate and follow the Buddha's path with compassion. We practice the Noble Eightfold Path to free ourselves from suffering. If we increase our suffering through judgmental attitudes and forceful practice, we will soon feel discouraged and may give up meditation. Western meditators often fall into this spiritual trap. From my Eastern perspective, they seem ambitious, pressured, goal-oriented, and lacking confidence when they start meditating. Discovering their restless minds, they try to control them immediately. They clamp down on their minds, trying to force them to behave through sheer willpower. But the mind does not follow orders. The result is often frustration and harsh self-judgment. This can also happen to experienced meditators who feel disappointed when they do not achieve their spiritual goals. It is important to remember that observing the mind and controlling the mind are different. Observing the mind with openness and gentleness helps it settle. Trying to control the mind or direct the outcomes of spiritual practice only stirs up more suffering and agitation. We can be open and gentle with our minds. Nothing that arises during meditation is a sign of failure. The only failure is not observing the mind. If unwholesome states arise and we cannot let them go, we should not resist or blame ourselves. Instead, we should calmly apply right effort with compassion to overcome them and uplift the mind. No one is inherently bad. We all share the same defilements: greed, hatred, jealousy, arrogance, sorrow, frustration, impatience, and so on. When we habitually face the mind's impermanent states with compassion, the mind can gradually settle. Then we can see things more clearly, and our wisdom will continue to grow. Compassion for parents. Most of us harbor hardened feelings and resentment toward our parents. Some find it very difficult to forgive their parents for what they did when they were young. Child abuse and other wrongdoings might have caused us immense pain and suffering. These actions are unforgivable and not easily forgotten. What our parents did cannot be changed. However, what we do right now can affect our happiness in the present and future. One way to develop compassion is to think about the hardships our parents endured when bringing us into the world and raising us. The Buddha taught that even if you were to place your parents, each on one shoulder, and care for them throughout your life, you still could not repay what they have done for you. Parents sacrificed their sleep, comfort, food, time, and energy for many days, months, and years. Consider the total helplessness of a baby and the immense needs it has. Think about the fears your parents faced trying to protect you. They took care of you through illnesses and worried immensely when you faced difficulties. Instead of blaming their ignorant actions, think about the suffering and afflictions caused by their defiled minds as they struggled with the challenges of raising a child. Imagine the intense struggles they went through to break free from attachments and other harmful actions driven by greed, anger, and delusion. Then, remember that the parents who raised you are not the same people you know today. Time has passed and impermanence has changed everyone. As your parents have grown older, they may have become more mature and wiser. You too may have grown up. Do not cling to the relationships of childhood. As your parents age, you might even need to reverse roles and support them fully, both materially, emotionally, and spiritually. Attending to your parents' needs can open your compassionate heart. Even if your parents gave you nothing but this life and continuous suffering, you should at least feel pity for them and wish for their happiness. I wish that I could help my parents find peace of mind. Compassion has no limits, no boundaries. Compassion for children. Maintaining a balanced life seems much more challenging when you have to raise children. Educating children in a balanced and moderate way can be likened to walking on a tightrope suspended 5 meters above the ground. Conversely, dealing with them in an authoritarian and rigid manner can turn you into their enemy. On the other hand, if you do not teach them the basics and ethical understanding, they will not know about limits or the consequences of their actions. If children are loved, taught, trained, and cared for with the respect they deserve as human beings, they will grow into responsible, loving, and kind adults. Our children will carry on responsibilities in life after we are gone. They can bring peace and happiness to you, other family members, society, and the entire world. But as any parent knows, children can test the patience of even the most tolerant person. When you feel like you are at your wit's end with them, remind yourself of a place in your heart that is free from ego. Let go of the desire for everything to happen according to your wishes. Try to empathize with your child's perspective, needs, fears, or concerns. Once you understand better what your child is facing, your heart will likely soften with compassion for them. With a mind full of compassion, your actions will naturally be marked by kindness and gentleness, which are essential to managing conflicts with anyone, whether an adult or a child. If you lack compassion for your children, fortunately, you can still cultivate it. It just takes practice. No one is born knowing how to raise a child to become a healthy, responsible, and loving adult. This ability needs to be developed. If you are a parent, it is your responsibility to learn as much as possible about raising children ethically, teaching them not to be greedy, angry, or deluded. These vices are already too prevalent in the world. Most importantly, you can show compassion for your children by teaching them to let go, to love, and to be compassionate. Compassion for your spouse. Practicing compassion towards your spouse requires generosity and patience. Each of us has different ways of living. Some people are very expressive. They often smile and cry easily. Others find it difficult to express their inner feelings and never cry. Some are very happy working and enjoy putting in extra hours. Others prefer to finish work quickly and use their free time to read, meditate, or visit friends. There is no right or wrong way. The person who enjoys working can savor life just as much as the one who loves to travel. Both are trying to avoid suffering and find as much happiness as possible. Both can be good and kind people. Focus on the good qualities of your spouse. Sometimes, after a conflict, you might feel harsher towards your partner. The lingering feelings of anger fill your mind, making you more defensive and critical of your partner's shortcomings. In such times, you may need significant inner work before your compassion can arise. During meditation, you can reflect on your unwholesome actions in body, speech, and mind, recognizing moments when you have been greedy, selfish, angry, envious, or arrogant. Then, with an open heart, consider how these actions might have affected your spouse. If you are prone to anger, that is your shortcoming, regardless of what your spouse has done. Are you holding on too tightly? Attachment and true love are very different. If the conflicts between you and your spouse are irreparable and unbearable, then you need to end the situation. But do so peacefully, accepting your own faults and wishing your partner well. Why add to their pain with anger and blame? It is crucial not to compare your actions to those of your spouse or judge their actions as unwholesome. Instead, focus on your own actions and take responsibility for them. Remember moments when you looked into your partner's eyes and saw the pain you caused. Remind yourself that you brought suffering to someone you love. If you can admit your faults, see how your actions have caused suffering, and care about your partner's happiness, compassion and love will flow within you. For example, if you had an argument with your spouse in the morning and they come home later looking cold and angry, checking to see if you're still upset. But you have reflected on your mistakes, opened the wellspring of love and compassion, and can look back at them with warmth and gentleness. Because of your compassion, the relationship between you has been mended. Mindfulness of right thinking. When meditating, many things arise in our minds. We may hear noises, feel itchy, and think about various matters. We might even momentarily forget that we are meditating and trying to focus on our breath. This is natural. It happens to everyone. When we lose focus on our breath, we need to quickly realize it, acknowledge its impermanence, how it arose, grew, and faded, and then return to the breath. However, some thoughts or mental states are particularly tricky and require special attention. These are the unwholesome mental factors that arise from greed, hatred, and delusion whenever we lack mindfulness. Wisdom cannot develop when the mind is immersed in unwholesome states. Not only do we waste time and cause physical discomfort, but we also strengthen the mental formations that create suffering. We must subdue unwholesome thoughts immediately, quickly pushing them out of the mind with mindfulness before they dominate, grow, and take over our meditation session. Sometimes, such thoughts will pass by simply recognizing their impermanence. Other times, we need to arouse strong effort to subdue them. We will discuss various methods for this in the chapter on right effort. Once an unwholesome thought has been subdued, we return to the breath with a deeper level of concentration. If another negative thought arises, we repeat these efforts. Each time an unwholesome mental factor is subdued, we go deeper into concentration. Gradually, we realize that our focus has become so steady that other mental factors no longer appear. It may take considerable meditation practice to reach this state of calm, or it might happen quickly. Once deep concentration is achieved, we use this strong mental state to return to the practice of mindfulness, observing objects as they draw our attention. Since thoughts have settled, we observe other objects, such as bodily sensations or positive mental qualities like joy or equanimity. We focus on the impermanent nature and related characteristics of these objects as before, but with a strong, concentrated mind, insight develops rapidly. When deep concentration is sustained, no unwholesome thoughts can arise to hinder our meditation. However, until we reach that level of tranquility, we must skillfully deal with unwholesome mental states as they arise. We must confront and address these mental states whenever they appear, even outside of meditation. Mindfulness of right thinking encompasses all these efforts. One method to counteract an unwholesome thought is to analyze its harmful consequences. You can see how it corrupts your mind. You can see how the habit of negative thinking makes your life difficult. Then you can cultivate the opposite, a wholesome thought, such as a feeling of compassion. This is a good opportunity to reflect on yourself and change your life by changing your thinking. People often ask me, how can we integrate meditation into daily life? I usually answer with questions I ask myself. What do I do when I sit on the meditation cushion? Do I just focus on the breath? If that is all you do, then you are living two different lives, the life on the meditation cushion and the ordinary daily life. Many things need to be addressed when you meditate. The same defiled mental states that create problems in our daily lives, greed, fear, anger, jealousy, self-criticism, also arise during meditation. They can appear as unwholesome thoughts whenever we let our attention or mindfulness lapse. First, we must try to abandon these mental states. We do this both to purify the mind at that moment and to train the mind to habitually purify itself. When a mental state is so strong that no amount of effort can dispel it, it indicates that we need to be more diligent. We must thoroughly investigate these mental states and bring them into our practice to develop insight in life. For example, if we are meditating and become overwhelmed with angry thoughts about being insulted by a stranger, we may try various methods to subdue these thoughts, but they persist. Therefore, we investigate them. First, we examine how this mental state affects our meditation, how it creates tension in our body and impacts our blood pressure, and how it keeps us resentful toward the other person. We realize these angry thoughts are harmful as they hurt us and negatively affect our mind, potentially leading us to harm others. Next, we may think about how shameful it would be if others knew what we were thinking, and we develop a sense of shame for letting such thoughts dominate our mind. This method of investigation often creates enough space to free the mind from negative states. Once the mind is calm, we can examine our thoughts more deeply, contemplating their origins. Why are we still upset after being insulted? We ask ourselves, what am I clinging to that keeps this insult lingering in my mind? We may discover that the root cause is something from the past, unrelated to the current insult. Next, we consider, well, the person did insult me, but what did I do to provoke his anger? Was I too hasty or too greedy, too arrogant? Perhaps I had no ill intentions, but I know I have irritated others in the past. Next time, I will act better. By reflecting on our motivations and unwholesome actions, we resolve to change. Once we see our part in the conflict, we can develop compassion for the person who was so troubled that he felt the need to retaliate by insulting us. This self-reflection is a crucial part of meditation practice. Before attaining enlightenment, the Buddha himself practiced in this way, using defiled mental states as a means to look inward and correct his faults. While meditating in the forest before his enlightenment, the Buddha would tell himself, I have this flaw. I did that in the past. From now on, my actions must be different. If you recall an instance where you spoke harshly to a child and saw the hurt and confusion in their eyes, you can make amends by apologizing and strive to speak more gently in the future. Or if you remember a conversation where you stubbornly clung to your mistaken viewpoint, next time resolve to let go of your attachment more gracefully. If a persistent desire arises, such as wanting to eat ice cream or buy a new CD, you can use this opportunity to cultivate the opposite, which is the mind of generosity. You might think, I don't really need this right now. I can let go of this desire. If you are generous and open-hearted, gradually, the craving will diminish. Then you will realize how trivial or self-centered your desires are. Practicing this way, you will understand the nature of craving better. After using this newfound understanding to change your way of thinking, return to your breath. Another effective method is when your thoughts are swirling uncontrollably and your mind is full of suffering, restlessness, or anxiety. Use your suffering to cultivate the wholesome state of compassion. Seeing the suffering in your mind, contemplate how this suffering affects others. This situation doesn't affect only me. Everyone has gone through it, and there are many people suffering even more than I am. One meditator shared that he once felt very depressed. One day, while walking alone in the park, he saw a piece of newspaper. He picked it up and read about a man walking in extreme pain because he had only one shoe. As he walked, his bare foot was freezing and cracked. The man with one shoe passed by a man with only one leg. Gratitude filled his heart. At least I still have both my legs, the man thought, and his suffering disappeared. Reading this story, the meditator felt a wave of compassion for those who were suffering more than he was, and all his depression vanished. You can use a similar method whenever your mind is filled with suffering, anger, or distress. Just stop and ask yourself, why am I complaining? My mind still functions. I still have all my senses, and I have the time and place to meditate. Compared to many people in the world, I live a fulfilling life. Millions of people have no home, no food, no hope. Instead of feeling miserable, let me cultivate compassion for these people. Compassion calms your thoughts so you can return to your breath with a more settled and stable mind. This practice is not only for serious meditation sessions. Whatever you do while sitting in meditation, you should also do in every other moment. Bring the training of mindfulness into daily life and apply it in all situations, on the bus, at work, when sick, and when healthy. Otherwise, what good is it to sit on the meditation cushion for hours? Use every effort to avoid or let go of unwholesome mental states and encourage wholesome ones, just as you do when meditating. Practicing this way outside of meditation sessions is a powerful challenge, as each day brings countless opportunities to forget due to actions driven by greed, anger, and delusion in response to what you see and hear. For example, if you are shopping in a mall and see some beautiful items in store windows, with an untrained mind, you cannot look away. You walk into the store and admire the items. You feel you cannot leave without buying one or two things. You may not have the money with you, but you have a credit card, so you still make the purchase. To practice right thinking, you must stop yourself in this process, just as you do when you recognize an unwholesome thought during meditation. First, control and identify your thoughts and feelings. Ask yourself if it is greed, fear, or lack of confidence driving you to shop unnecessarily. Then, reason with yourself. I'm using a credit card to pay for this. Do I really want to incur more debt? Even if you have plenty of money, it's important to purify the attachment from your thought process. Ask yourself, do I really need this item, or am I buying it for some other reason? Am I just trying to impress others? Don't I already have several similar items collecting dust in my closet? You can also ask, is there a better way to use this money to help others? If you are unsure about your motivation, perhaps because greed and genuine need are mixed, or because the desire is too overwhelming, ask yourself, do I need to buy this right now? Can I pass on it now and come back next week? Can I ask the salesperson to hold it while I reconsider? This reasoning skillfully applies the good habits we've developed on the meditation cushion. Such training will surely be useful when we face more challenging situations. Once, I had to use my training in right thinking to overcome fear in a truly dangerous situation. It happened when I received news that my mother was seriously ill. On my way from Washington, D.C. to Sri Lanka, I transferred to a large jet in Hawaii. 1 or 2 hours after the plane left Hawaii, I looked out the window and saw flames coming from the engine. At that moment, the pilot announced over the loudspeaker that the engine was on fire and we had to turn back. He told the flight attendants to instruct us on how to evacuate the plane if we made it back to Hawaii. The flight attendant told us to sit quietly with our seat belts fastened. When the plane landed, the floor lights would guide us to the 8 emergency exits. The doors would open automatically and the emergency slides would deploy. We would have to run immediately to the exit, slide down, and run away from the plane. I thought that few people understood all these instructions. The moment the pilot announced that the engine was on fire, everyone in the cabin seemed panicked and afraid of dying. Some were making the sign of the cross, couples were holding each other tightly, some were crying, and others looked tense and anxious. I thought, if this is the time for me to die, I will die no matter if I am afraid or not. So I must keep my mind calm. First, I recalled my knowledge about death. I saw death as inevitable, and this was a good time to die because I had done good deeds and had no regrets. Then I thought about the possible scenarios. If the plane falls quickly from a height of over 10,000 meters, we will lose consciousness before it crashes into the sea. I didn't know if this was scientifically accurate, but it was what I thought at the time. I told myself, I must keep my mind very clear and calm before losing consciousness. This is the time to use mindfulness to accept the inevitable death. If I die gently with a pure, clear mind, my future life will be better. I might achieve enlightenment by seeing the truth of impermanence. I should not let fear or panic disturb my mind. No matter how strong my attachment to life is, I must let go of that attachment now. So I made an effort to prevent any unwholesome mental states from arising when facing death, and to encourage the arising of positive mental states. I might have been too amazed to feel fear, so I did not feel afraid. I actually enjoyed watching the flames from the engine at an altitude of over 11,000 meters. The flames were blue, yellow, and red. It's rare to see such blue flames. Sometimes they flared up, sometimes they dimmed. They looked like fireworks. While I was enjoying this sight, about 300 other people on the plane were suffering immensely. Occasionally, I observed the other passengers and could see the suffering they were enduring as they thought about death. They seemed to have died before actually taking their last breath. However, I noticed that the small children did not seem to be affected. They were still laughing and playing as they had been before the chaos started. I thought, try to put yourself in their place with a child's mind. We made it back to Hawaii and the plane landed in an emergency. We exited through the emergency doors as instructed and slid down the chutes. It was a completely new experience for me. Everyone else on the plane must have at least played on a slide as a child, but I never had that in the poor village where I grew up. So even until the end of the accident, I was still excited. Summary of right thinking. As we have recognized, the journey on the path to happiness according to the Buddha requires us to apply every step of the Noble Eightfold Path to real life. We need objects to receive our generous gifts. We need friends as well as enemies to stir up friendship. We need suffering people to develop our compassion. Human society provides us with a perfect environment to test the key points of right thinking. When right view has been developed, right thinking will naturally follow. Thinking can make us happy or miserable. The Buddha guided us towards 3 skillful thoughts: letting go or generosity in its highest meaning, loving kindness and compassion. Begin practicing generosity by giving away material possessions. Clinging to anything, form, feeling, perception, mental formations, or consciousness brings suffering. When a fearful mind arises, observe how it develops and then passes away. Loving kindness, a sense of connection with all beings, and a sincere wish for all to be happy, creates deep impacts. Anger will ultimately harm us more than the person who makes us angry. Train yourself to control your anger. Mindfulness can help us reduce and gradually eradicate anger. Compassion is a feeling of empathetic concern for the suffering of others, combined with a wish to alleviate their suffering. Cultivating compassion for yourself, your parents, your children, and your spouse will help you find peace and soothe your heart. During meditation, if unwholesome mental states arise, they will quickly pass if you simply focus on their impermanent nature. If negative thoughts persist despite our best efforts, it is a sign to observe them more thoroughly, to develop insight into daily habits. Reflecting on unwholesome mental states is an important part of meditation practice. Practicing right thinking during meditation can help us control fear, anger, and attachment in daily life.